everyone, and welcome to our Thought Leadership series on the future of access control, brought to you by Brevo and Symphony Technology Solutions, and sponsored by The Inside. My name is Katie Galley, the marketing manager here at Symphony, and I will be moderating today's informative discussion. Our panelists diving into this topic are Rob Cadman, Regional Sales Director with Brevo, Trey Gaskins, President of the IoT Division at Symphony, Lee Odess, founder of The Inside, and Avery Greer, Business Development Rep at Symphony. So to kick us off today, we're just going to go around the table. Everybody's going to give about a 30-second kind of spiel or summary how you got the job that you have today. So Rob, you want to kick us off?
Absolutely, yeah, thank you. I actually started in the security industry in '07, working in the warehouse for a low voltage distributor. I've always been fascinated with technology, so I really just leaned in and started learning as much as I could about everything I sold. Quickly moved into inside sales, did that until about 2011 when I went to an outside sales role with an alarm manufacturer. Then in 2015, I joined Brevo as the Southeastern Regional Sales Manager, and then worked that role until January of this year when I was promoted to Southeast Regional Sales Director.
There you go. It's a big promotion beginning of the year.
Yep. All
right, Trey.
Well, thanks. Thanks, Katie, for coordinating this once again. I've been in the technology space for probably more years than I care to mention, but after a stint with IBM for 10 years, I had an idea to start a company, and I started serving technology in the multifamily space. And then over the years, had a couple different companies I've worked with, but a couple years back, had an idea that there was a gap between the low voltage integrators that were in particular multifamily markets. It was very fragmented. There wasn't really a regional or national player that could handle the kind of the breadth of services. And so partnered up with Eric Fickner and kind of created a new division that we call the Internet of Things division. So all the devices, including access control devices, we think of that as part of the Internet of Things world. And we thought if we could not be everything to everybody, but very intentionally, if we could get expert level status in several products, but very focused around the multifamily space, that there would be a market for that. And we've been very pleased to see the results of that. So anyways, we'll talk more about that in a minute, but that's how we got where we're at today.
Yeah. Lee, how about you?
I appreciate it, and thanks for the opportunity to do this. Lee Odess, as you said, from The Inside. Recently, at the beginning of the year, we started The Inside, which also includes some consulting. We have a platform of voices, just like with yours, and we're proud partners with you on really bringing storytelling and content out to the industry. Focused access control, visitor management, and a bunch from there. Myself, been in the industry for close to about 20 years. I was an integrator, worked for Allegion, worked for Brevo, and then brought myself here on my own. So very excited to be here and share what I know to your listeners.
Yeah, we're excited too, Lee. You got quite the rap sheet there with access control in your background.
I don't know what it says, whether I have a hard time with commitment or what, but yeah. No.
All right, Avery, you want to bring us home?
Absolutely. Certainly less seasoned than our other panelists here, but came from property management, where a lot of this technology was used, obviously, in a kind of real-time situation, and really saw an opportunity with the technology that we saw that was out there, and how we could, kind of implement that to, benefit residents, property managers, maintenance, developers, and, helping the whole ecosystem understand that there's always a kind of a better way to do things. So that's kind of where Symphony and I, joined with Symphony and able to kind of make those theories a reality. So.
Awesome. Well, I'm super excited. We have some great panelists today to dive into our discussion. And to kick us off, Rob is going to take us through a brief presentation from Brevo, just kind of diving into the background of access control and just laying that groundwork. So, Rob?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So, when talking about the future of access control, it's kind of important to level set on the history of it. So, wanted to go over kind of what access control has looked like throughout. So it started with the physical lock and key. We've all had those in our homes and everything else. Issues with those are somebody loses them, gets fired, quits. You have to go do a costly rekey. They're easily duplicated, and there's no audit trail to it. From that, the industry went to on-premise access control, where you could control who went where, who had access to which doors. You could go through and revoke credentials, put time schedules on it and everything like that. But the limitations on that were really the locally hosted option. The fact that you did have to stand up a server, you have to power it, you have to cool it, you have to maintain it, you have to run your own backups, and all of the limitations that go with hosting anything yourself. Which leads us into where Brivo has always been and where the future of access control is going, which is the cloud-hosted version of it. So on the cloud, everything is taken care of for you. All of the backups are done. Cybersecurity vulnerability updates are done. You're always on the latest, greatest version of the software. Firmware updates are done on a regular basis without having to roll trucks. And it's just easier and simple for the integrator as well as the end user to maintain their system and let it just operate in the background doing what it's supposed to do without having to roll up their sleeves and get into it a lot. So also wanted to go over, just for the audience, a little bit about what the overall functionality of access control is. You, of course, have your credential that comes in a variety of different formats. Credentials, of course, speak to your readers. Readers decrypt that credential, send that to the control panel to make the decision whether access is granted or denied, again, depending on the schedule, the door, and the group that the person is in. And then, of course, it reports everything up to the central database, which in our case is cloud, but could also be a locally hosted option. And then from there, you have your applications that actually interface with that database. So that's just a 30,000 foot view of the functionality of access control to level set our audience.
Well, thanks, Rob, for giving that that background. That was hugely helpful. And it's clear that with the way you just we're talking about access control and kind of the growth of it, so where it started to where it is today. But I think too, and we've had this discussion before, access control can be defined as or span into a lot of areas. So I just wanted to kick it over to you guys. And could each of you, maybe within the industries that you're in, within the realm of space that you're in, can you define what access control means to you? And maybe Rob, you want to kick us off, and then we can just go from there.
Yeah, so a very basic definition of access control is controlling who has access to what space during what time and on what group. So it's really just managing the flow in and out of your facility.
Yeah, I was going to say, to jump on that, that's 100%. So if we were to take a look at sort of how it's then evolving from there in a lot of places, it's also this idea of understanding the identity of who the person is, and then the space is responding to it. So again, the functionality of the person, the place, the things that are in between it, and that management and acceptance of who those people are based off of an authentication of who they are, whether that's multi-factor by different devices or ways they get in, but it is that sort of representation of the person to the place.
I think, obviously agree with what they just said, but I think, there's other elements that kind of expand. So when I think of access control, I think of in the multifamily space, getting into the amenity areas, getting into the pool, the leasing office, the workout areas, and those parts. But there's also like visitor management. There's you getting into your unit, and I think in the past there's been a lot of you might have a hard key, you might have a key fob, you might have a couple of different key fobs, and so trying to simplify all that, make it really mobile friendly, but being able to manage that if you're the property manager very seamlessly and remotely, and if you have a resident that moves out, be able to flip a switch to make sure all that access is gone immediately, not have to grab hard keys, things like that. So I think the areas that can be controlled have expanded over the last couple of years, and that there's a different lens you can put on it. There's the resident experience, there's the property manager experience, and looking at those personas and building solutions that make each of those personas more efficient has really been neat to watch. And a lot of our clients are expecting those to be really tightly integrated, and that's what's been kind of fun to see.
And so with that in mind, I mean, Rob and Trey and Lee, you all touched on it. One, looking into how Brevo is this access or the cloud access aspect of it, and Trey touching on the mobile aspect. So looking at how technology has evolved and really been catalyzed specifically in the last couple of months with everything that's been going on. So how do you maybe combat that? So looking forward without having any real knowledge of the technology and what's to come, how maybe does access control, how can you stay in front of that, abreast with that? And so kind of thinking about how mobile has really started to shift access control.
Yes, I'll go ahead and start it off. I think, just like every other aspect of life, everything is going to a mobile-centric view. You can do online banking, you can shop, you can listen to music, watch movies, all from your pocket. So security is really no different, and people expect that convenience whenever they're using anything, especially when you get into the multifamily space. Nobody wants to have to carry multiple credentials, physical key to get in and out of their facility. Keys are often forgotten. Mobile credentials are never forgotten because nobody really leaves home without their phone anymore. So just giving the masses what they want, mobile is really the future of that.
Yeah, my take on it is everyone typically wants to have sort of a binary conversation of like, is it mobile, is it cards? And my belief on it, it's just another way. So it's the flexibility, if you would, of allowing and really meeting the customer where they're at, and then based on the use case and the needs. So I look at mobile as an extension of the systems. Now, what it does that I like is that it really forces some of the legacy products that are on the marketplace to have to either be ripped and replaced, frankly, to support it, or maybe at some point make them somewhat irrelevant in a lot of cases, just for the fact that they a lot of the systems that are built were built to last for, say, 30 years with use cases of just security in mind. Didn't really have levels of convenience with it, because convenience in our industry forever has been seen as being insecure. And now, though, technology challenges that conventional wisdom, where you can have convenience and security at the same time. And mobile's a good example where mainstream understands that technology can help increase the security and convenience. Our industry has fought that over the years, but now, like as Rob said, the masses are asking for it. It reminds me of the days of bring your own device. Forever people didn't want to do that, but then all of a sudden, when people started doing it, places had to respond. So I see this as being no different.
I feel like the access control of today is you got to be mobile friendly, but you can't be all mobile. So you have to have flexibility in having kind of a backup plan. But I think from a convenience standpoint, from a 40% of all the people that go in and out of multifamily communities these days are non-residents. So how do you grant that access control to your dog walker, to your Amazon delivery person? And I think to be able to mobily send credentials is been an awesome advancement. And the neat thing is it's all tracked. You can tell that Trey gave Rob the credentials. I did it at this particular time. You can set up schedules for a weekend, or if you have a friend coming in town, for example, like that. So all those are fairly simplistic solutions. And it's been awesome to see that there's a couple companies like Rob's that have built software and these APIs that allow you to tie into mobile phones and to other services. And maybe that's a next point, Rob, is talk about some of the neat things that you can do once you have an API-based solution.
Yeah, absolutely. So the days of physical integration, tying in one piece of electronic to another via wires are I don't want to say a thing of the past, because there will always be a place for it, but the future of integrations is all on the cloud. So with APIs, which are application programming interfaces, you can go through and tie together multiple what were historically disparate systems to give somebody a unified experience. Very good example of that in the multifamily space is a partner of ours, which is Stratus, that I know Symphony uses quite a bit. They put together a entire solution where you can, of course, get into your unit. You can control your unit through lights, locks, thermostats. You can open Brevo doors. You can service tickets. You can really gives you that full experience where in the past they would have had to, even in, if mobile was a thing in the past without APIs, they would have had to have multiple different apps to control that. Whereas putting together that unified experience through APIs is really just giving that end user exactly what they want.
And so, Rob, with that in mind, and I think, Lee, you touched on it too, you're saying, giving the end user exactly what they want, and with the kind of the growth of technology and shifts to mobile, have you experienced maybe any pushback from residents or any pushback from, I don't know, just having that increased use of technology? Has anybody kind of been against that, or it's hard to kind of bridge that gap of education, and how do you go about that?
So in the multifamily space, I actually have not heard or seen much pushback on it. The only pushback we really ever hear is going to be more in the commercial space from your entrenched facility managers, the ones like Lee mentioned before that had that 30-year life cycle on a piece of access control because convenience was not a part of what they were looking for. In the multifamily space where you're dealing with people of all ages, people of all technology levels, tenants are really looking for that sort of experience when they're going to move in and start spending a lot of money to live in a high amenity type area.
Well, and I think that's the key, though, and to keep in mind, too, is that we talk in very broad general terms, but there's also different, Class A, Class B, C, and different. So as Rob said in Class A, I think it's now to almost getting to the point where it's a foregone conclusion that you're going to incorporate these types of technologies, the expectations of the people that are living there, the benefits of it are going to be outweigh any of the drawbacks. I do think it comes into some timing and sequencing of products, because again, they've made purchases in the past, and maybe they made it just a couple years ago and it doesn't support it. Like, what do they do now? So they have to make some decisions on how to incorporate these types of technologies to places where they've already invested. So you have a little bit of that sort of catch-up game that's happening. And then I do think as time goes, you'll see it. Now, I do believe events like COVID happen to accelerate adoption, and if there's a marketplace that I think is definitely, you're going to continue to see that acceleration, will be like in the multifamily space, and remote capability, the log, the capability, like all of the benefits that you get from having it. And really the mobile side feature of, I would say, a much larger architectural decision that you've made of how a system would be put together. And it's seen as a feature versus sort of like the centerpiece we're currently. And I think that's what our industry is going to evolve to at some point soon, is to move away. Like right now, mobile is a centerpiece conversation that everyone has because it was new compared to what was there. Now that there's been a rush of people in the marketplace where, everybody has mobile at this point, not everybody, but enough people that promote it, that you're going to start to actually get, I think, to some of the really good conversations, like the value creation that they have, and you'll see some differentiations of the systems based off of not necessarily having mobile, but mobile can do, or the impacts of the way that you have implemented mobile into your overall solution.
So then I guess looking forward, then Lee, you just touched on that, how COVID kind of catalyzed, and then looking forward, how to maybe the shifts being made to and away from mobile. What steps do you guys see, or do you see any steps being taken to kind of future-proof access control?
Yeah, I guess my two parts. First one is non-technical. It's really the curiosity and awareness has increased a lot. So you're having more people at least start to ask the right questions, if you would, or at least ask questions, period, around not necessarily, there's not a lot of people like, I need cloud-based access control. I think people ask for features and ways that systems work that are supported by cloud-based access control. Now, there are people that do know what it is and that do ask, but majority, I would say, if anything, it's the curiosity and awareness has increased a lot. So people are starting to pay a lot more attention to it, and people, I think, deeper into organizations that make decisions are starting to get involved. So it's moved out of, say, the maintenance or security room, and it's now at the CFO, CEO level type conversations, because we're talking about business continuity now. We're talking about marketing differentiation with CMOs and the rest. So that's like the first thing that they can do. And then I think the second one is that having good partners and really reaching out to people that they trust within the space that can get them the information, because there's a flood and a ton of information that's out in the marketplace. So being curious, but then figuring out who to talk to gather the information are like the first 2 steps, in my opinion.
And so then, Lee, with that in mind, do you have maybe parameters around, so if you're looking for someone to partner with or who might have that insight into access control, what the right questions are to ask or what to look for?
Well, yeah, I think gathering the requirements of number one, of like sitting down and understanding. So things like we talked about, where you'll have like touchless, right, being the ability to do it, or this ability to get access to your system anywhere and everywhere, right? Like, so understanding like that, like if you have to do a lockdown, or the ability to change schedules and to be able to do things on demand, like those are the things that are going to drive you to make selection based off of cloud-based systems.
Mm-hmm.
The other part of it is that I think reaching out to local contacts that you have of people that, that's why I think it's great with the type of work that you all do with this, is that you're promoting the thought leadership around these subjects. So in a way, you're educating the marketplace, and you are a leader in this because you are driving the message in the marketplace and creating a place for people to go to gather that. So a bit of education on by themselves to put that together, and then sort of a direct connection to reaching out to people like yourself to help figure out, because they may not know. And I think that's okay to also say, like, I don't know. I just know I want to be able to get to my stuff without having to actually drive a truck to go pick up and like go on site. Like that might be the only thing that they're worried about. So I would start to get educated and reach out to people like yourself.
Yeah, and I mean, that makes sense. So bridging that gap, that educational gap, I guess. So it's, I guess, towing the line of, what you don't know versus you really don't know what you don't know. So trying to learn where access control is going, and like you said, partner with the right people. And Lee, too, you brought up touchless. So that's, something that's been brought up, I guess, probably for a while now, but specifically with the impacts of COVID in the last couple of months, talks around kind of those touchless integrations, touchless technology. So Rob, could you maybe dive into, from the Brevo perspective, just kind of some insights onto that touchless technology?
Yeah, so I mean, touchless, like you said, it's been kind of a talking point for a while that has really ramped up since March, when COVID started hitting the U.S. with full force. But a lot of people kind of use touchless as a marketing term for the reader itself, which is where it starts. But you also have to look at, when you're looking at touchless options, the actual door itself. So without going into, installing automatic door openers and things like that, it's really hard to get that full touchless solution. It's just a matter of reducing the amount of touch points that they have. So mobile is a great way to do that. I mean, we all know mobile phones are very germ covered, but they're covered with your own germs. It's something that generally you're the only person touching. So it's a good way to cut down on that common touch point of having to actually, get your hand close enough to that reader where you're actually going to graze it or come in contact with it. But just like everything else with COVID response, it's just one of the layers of many that needs to happen to try to eliminate all of the different, I guess, transmission points within a facility, whether it's a residential facility or a commercial facility.
And then too, Rob, I mean, like you said, it's those limiting those touch points. And so using mobile allows for that access, maybe getting into a room, but specifically maybe thinking about if you were going into a room and then the number of people within that room, or the number of, people touching different things within that room. Does access control then expand into not only a person entering the room, but how many are in there, and how to, properly sanitize? Could you go into that?
Yeah, so that would be kind of occupancy and density sensing. It's something that there are companies out there that have done it for a while for a variety of different reasons. It all kind of started with the parking deck and trying to keep the right amount of vehicles into it, but it's expanded into the building itself. So we actually at Brevo have a great partner on it that they do the occupancy sensing through, again, our APIs. But it's something that each facility, depending on their state, depending on what they do, really has to come up with what their guidelines are. And then access control and the technology they're putting in place should work around their guidelines instead of their guidelines being dictated by what their technology tells them that they have to do.
Got it. Got it. And so with that in mind, I mean, like we just talked about kind of the ever-changing landscape of technology, of access control, for each of you in each of your industries, can you go into maybe the primary challenges that you face with access control? So Trey, you want to kick us off?
I'd say as an integrator, what we're seeing is that access control needs to be elevated to kind of the beginning part of the conversation. And a lot of, in particular, new construction projects, it's a little bit of an afterthought. And so I think from a planning perspective, access control needs to be thought about early on in the cycle, about pathways, about how to get the connectivity from A to B and make sure everything is kind of well thought out. And that's part of the investment that we've made is we've hired access control engineers and installers that know that backwards and forwards. So it's a earlier part of the conversation. But also as an integrator, the Brivo system, for example, integrates with Stratus, who we are a supplier of, as well as Butterfly, as well as Schlaglocks, for example. And if you don't know what you're doing, all that integration, you can have some really cool technology, but if you don't know how to integrate it, and this particular case, there's a sequence of events that needs to occur. And if you don't know what you're doing, you can have a technology mess, and then you've got your property management and construction people going, gosh, we just bought this brand new technology and it stinks. And actually the technology is great. It's just, it hasn't been integrated. And so thinking about it earlier in the process, making sure you've got staff trained up on actually how to integrate it. We just moved to a new office a couple months ago, and all the stuff we're talking about right now, we have in our office and we use it ourselves. And we've got, our own little learning lab. And so I think you get a lot of this by experience. And so we drink our own Kool-Aid, and I think by using our own tools, making sure that our staff knows how to use them as well as our installation crew is helping us make sure that the integrations actually take place and they work. And it doesn't take a whole lot to screw it up, but it's something that you need a little bit of expertise and a little bit and frankly a lot of experience to be proficient.
Yeah, for me, I mean, from being, I would call it in the information business, if you would, it's getting the right information to the right people at the right time when they need it, and really, so that's why it's people are very busy and they're trying to find stuff. So just for me, it's making sure that we're creating the information that people need so they can help make an educated decision, or at least be able to say yes without worrying. That's what I'd like for a lot of what we're doing is to make sure people have the proper information so they can say yes and not have to worry about it.
Say yes without worrying. That's an oddly powerful statement.
Yeah. Yeah.
Rob, what about you?
I mean, yeah, and kind of echo what Trey was saying. It's all about the planning aspect of it. You can spend a lot of money on world-class hardware, and if you don't know what you're doing, you're going to have a very bad view of what you just paid for. It's partnering with the right integrator that can help you get everything set up correctly. Old famous saying, prior planning prevents poor performance. That is very true in this industry. Is you have to plan it out and be very thoughtful in how you're rolling out technology in order to get it to integrate and work in the way that's going to best fit your needs.
Mm-hmm. That was a nice alliteration, all the P's there. Trey, so you brought up in your response kind of discussing that the way to combat it is to make sure that access control, that discussion happens on the front end, it happens in the planning period. So having that be a pain point, do you have any suggestions or insight into how a person might begin to implement that, or how to kind of start bringing that conversation to that planning period rather than on the back end?
Well, stealing shamelessly from one of our clients, in a lot of new construction projects, you hear MEP plans. And one of our clients uses the phrase MEPT, and technology is getting kind of equal footing with MEP. So just talking about the technology, the pathways, getting the user experience down. One of our clients, we're working on a significant project. We literally defined all the different personas that the different users. So in this case, it was a mixed-use development, and you had people that they wanted one credential for, they had an office element, a condo element, and a hotel element, different parking arrangements, and to be able to simplify the access control got very confusing. So we literally had to define each of the different users and make sure that each use case there was a solution for it and everything kind of tied together. And so thinking about it early is key. And then there's other trades that we have to partner with. So in our case, we had to partner with the electrician who was pulling conduit in the pathways, and we had to make sure they're pulling them to the right place. We've all seen jobs where, if everybody's not speaking, maybe the access control wires, all of a sudden the pathway that we think is there, all of a sudden is not there, or we're going to fish it through a door frame, and then the door frame is filled with concrete, and all of a sudden it's not easy to fill. And so now you're having to deal with other problems that could have been avoided if it was planned early enough and everybody was talking. So that's kind of one of our traits, is that we really bring that to the beginning of the conversation, and when we get into quoting it and securing the job, that's a very early conversation for us. So that's kind of a new normal, and making sure that everybody knows what they're doing. So that's making it early is probably the biggest element of that.
And that makes sense. I mean, wanting to have it on the forefront. And of course, it seems that we've discussed stressing the importance of access control and needing to have those conversations early. So I wonder for each of you, if you could dive into maybe discussing, we defined access control in the beginning and went into this great conversation, what each of you sees as the ultimate goal of access control. So what we want to achieve through it and why it's so important. So Lee, you want to start?
Yeah, I think so. My belief is we're moving away from the access control side and moving it to, without being too cute here, the access care side. So I think the value proposition has changed from why you use a access control system, which was historically to keep bad people out, right? So you inconvenience a whole bunch of people in order for that to happen. We put barriers up and things like that. Now, that'll always be there, but now I also think, like we talked about, the convenience side coming on top of it, but then there's also now the health side. So the participation in the care part of people when they come to a place, whether they're known people, like, people that work at a place or live, or they're guests, so they're unknown on that case. But it's that interaction of the individuals with the space. And access control has an opportunity to elevate itself to actually drive more value beyond the actual locking and unlocking that it has historically done, and become far more human-centric. And I think that's going to happen now that we're being able to have a much different conversation than we've historically had before.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. And I like the control, like what you think of when you think of the word control versus care. It's very nice. And and it goes along with, I guess, where we're shifting, and specifically, like you said, bringing in that health component. It's a new component, but it's now necessary in the discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. I just think it's also interesting to me that, a way that we'll see that impact too is, I think, the way that we approach, where we've, again, I think historically have been a case, someone's like, I need a thing, so we bring a thing to them. So it's like I need the fever camera stuff that we saw going on was a classic example of, like, I need a hammer. It's like, I got a hammer. How many hammers do you need? Instead of having the conversation of understanding the impacts and the way that they get implemented, and, conversations like what could go wrong. I think we've not historically have had in a lot of cases that I think we're going to start having a lot more now.
Yeah. And so, Rob, for you, kind of bridging off of that, what do you see as the ultimate goal with access control?
Yeah, so, security is always going to be a portion of it. Keeping those bad people out is always going to be the core of what access control does. But it's also a matter of, like I said, bridging that gap and giving them that convenience, giving them the value, and making it, again, fit around what they want to do, what their needs are, rather than them having to shift their their operations to fit around their security. It's really securing spaces in a way that works best for that individual end user and being able to tailor that solution to fit their exact needs, because not every end user, and even in the multifamily space, not every multifamily development has the exact same need. So it's getting that scalability and customization around and building that custom solution for them is really the most important part of this that I see.
Trey, how about for you?
Well, I want to give Avery a chance to weigh in here. Thanks for joining us, Avery. But Avery's an interesting example of our firm where he's in sales, and his job is to help us find new clients. But he also likes to be very hands-on. So, like literally yesterday, he was at one of our clients' properties doing some of the physical installs because he wants to know kind of exactly how everything works. And so, I guess from our perspective, the end user experience has got to be thought of, but we also got to think of the technician experience as well as the property manager's experience. And so, a couple things we've kind of touched on, but there's elements where, when a new resident moves in a multifamily example, you might have 4 or 5 different databases that you need to populate information. And if you're working with one of the property management systems that happens to have a Brivo API, all that information can be populated automatically, which is pretty cool. So there's a property management element that keeps getting easier and easier. But from an installation standpoint, it needs to be manageable, and it needs to be something that is repeatable and scalable. And let's let Avery kind of talk about the technical experience. But I think from an access control standpoint, and again, I've got my Internet of Things hat on, the access control is just one of many different devices. And if you're going to have these things integrate, you got to have a little bit of smarts behind it, but you want to work with products that are very reliable. We've picked some great partners in that regard. And I think as an integrator, I love the fact that we can make this a seamless experience if it's planned well, and make it mobile friendly, and make it really as simple as possible. So anyway, Avery, tell us about some of your implementation experiences, just real quick.
Yeah. So just coming from property management, definitely one of the biggest pain points outside of water damage and things that developers use with, or kind of deal with, is access control. Is definitely the most touch system, from residents to property managers to maintenance staff, and there's a element of efficiency and the ability to address certain situations sooner or later. In a traditional kind of lock and key situation, if a resident calls with they're a water damage leak, and the neighbor said, I think it's coming from the apartment above me, we don't have to go back to the leasing office to pull 2 or 3 sets of keys. The maintenance staff is able to go right to the door, grant the access, and address the situation, and potentially limit that damage over what would have taken a phone call or running back to the leasing office to go gain that get that physical key to put into the lock. So it's definitely something that as property managers and developers can look at something as a way to protect themselves and address certain situations sooner from a kind of a back of house scenario. But it also, like I said, in everything that you guys have touched on, it provides an experience that is driven by convenience. And it's kind of it'll always keep the wrong people out, but now it's allowing the easiness of the right people getting in, from residents to visitors, and that's really changed the game. Coming from property management, dealing with visitors and having to grant them access from a traditional kind of telephone driven gate system to how do they move about the property. If you don't have a centralized system, it's a burden on property management staff and leasing agents to do that. Also try and take tours and make sure you're efficiently moving throughout the property and giving showcasing that experience that those developers really wanted to implement with the systems that they chose at the beginning of the design. And then, of course, that's where what Trey touched on, the conversations of addressing that early and understanding what that resident experience is supposed to be like, the property manager and maintenance staff. That goes a long way to address those things early to understand what that end experience is like.
It's really clear that access control, Avery, like you said, it's not just me getting into my room. It's okay. It just touches on so many different areas. And all of you touched on just the different breadths and how deep it can really go, and just the importance of access control. So before we wrap today, and of course I'll go into letting everybody know where we can, Brevo and the inside where we can reach you guys. But do you guys have any closing remarks on the future of access control?
I'll just say one more time.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm kind of repeating myself again, but I feel like it's all integrated, and it's expanding, and it's for the visitor entry, as I said before, to your door locks, to your pulling into your parking deck and having the reader read the sticker on your car to let you in the parking deck. All those things are integrated, and it's making life a lot easier. It's a shiny bright object on some levels for the resident, but there's a whole lot more to it than that. It's a huge win for property management, for maintenance, and at the end of the day, for developers, there's some very compelling return on investment scenarios. So I think this is a neat area where you just don't spend money to spend money, but you can spend money wisely and get a solid return on investment, and it's a win in so many different areas.
Yeah. So I guess like a big takeaway, Trey, Lee, and Rob, you all touched on it. One, it's having these conversations early on in the planning period, and then two, just continuing to educate as the landscape continues to shift. Just continue that educational piece. Thank you so much to our panelists today, as we created some technology harmony with the Simply Better Security Cloud Access Control System, Brevo. Thanks to Rob with Brevo, and to all of our panelists today for giving such an insightful discussion on the future of access control. To stay up to date on all things Symphony, you can follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube at Symphony Technology Solutions. To learn more about Brevo, you can follow them on LinkedIn and Facebook at Brevo. And to learn more about our media partner, Inside Access Control, you can reach out to Lee Odess directly on LinkedIn and follow along at The Inside. Thank you all again, and we'll see you next time.